I think it's actually so simple. It comes down to fear-based versus loyalty-based, right? And so if you think about Maslow's pyramid, like your basic needs need to be met no matter what. Like you have to have those things. And so when you're, in a fear-based organization, whether that's, organized crime or working for wherever office you are, if you are being driven by fear, like if you don't do this, you're going to get fired, and like, or we're not going to we're going to dock your pay, or we're going to do these things that are all just very negative and fear based, you're in survival mode. You're not trying to think about how to innovate, how to do better, how to improve a system. You're just trying to survive because you're so afraid that, in the corporate world, like losing your job in a lot of ways is certain death, right? Like in the job market, it's so unpredictable. That's the bottom of the pyramid that you are messing with.
Laura, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. Thank you so much for asking. It's wonderful having you have on the show. It's great. I don't know. You so wait. You are in Mexico right now, right?
Yes, so I came
Okay,
down just for the summer, and I just
that's
keep
right.
extending because it's been so great.
Well, and I don't know because like the weather has definitely been changing this last week. Because I almost thought I was like, wait a second, you're not in New York, you're in Mexico right now, and the weather has just been amazing the last 2 days, and we're getting a front coming in today, so it's going to be in the 50s tomorrow in Texas, which is incredible.
Oh, it's like 75 year-round here, and it's
Okay,
the best. It's pool weather all the time, except in the summer. Weirdly, it rains in the summer like once a day in the afternoons,
okay.
but like it's just like the best weather here.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now, are you what really kind of intrigued you to move down there? At least temporary right now. Has it been like kind of lifestyle? Just kind of getting because I mean you were coming from New York, so I have family in New York. A lot of people went to New York in August. I love the city. I would never actually probably want to live there. But I love visiting. The energy is amazing.
It is.
So yeah, walk me through that a little bit.
I mean, I love New York. I've been there for almost a decade, and it's just an incredible place. The energy
Yeah.
is really what makes it. But my lease was up, and I was looking for an apartment, and apartment hunting in New York is brutal. But
Yeah.
also, I'd been wanting to visit Mexico City, and I kept trying to get my friends to come. So I had never actually visited, but I told my friends, oh, yeah, I've been. It's great. Like, we should just totally go. And they were like, no, like, let's go to the beach instead. I'm like, no, guys, it's great. And so when I really started looking into it, it was just the food scene, the activity. Like, there's so much history, there's so much to do that I was like, I'm not going to get this done in like a week. So
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I can come down for like a month. And then it was like, well, maybe I'll just wait out the summer rentals in New York season. And then the end of summer came, and I was like, maybe I'll just stay till the end of the year. And now
Yeah.
I'm like, why would I go back in the winter? Maybe I'll go back in the spring. So it's just been like a domino of maybe I'll just stay here for a very long time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I have to ask, and this will probably end up airing this show after probably in about November, but we're coming up on Day of the Dead. Are you planning on any activities for that time?
Excited. I'd watched like the Disney movie on it. What was it, like the Book of Life?
Coco.
Coco and the Book of Life, like they touch on like the Day of the Dead and
Yeah.
stuff. But it was, I was raised in Texas, and we weren't really brought up into that culture and like all of those rituals and things
Yeah.
like that. So it's been really cool to really reconnect with it and like learn more on what it's about. And it's just this really beautiful thing about remembering,
Yeah.
the loved ones, and that's how they stay alive in our memories. And they have these ofrendas, and like they have a great parade, which I learned was not a thing until the James Bond movie,
Oh,
which is
really?
like that pretty
Oh
much.
my! I see. I thought that they had filmed that during this like huge
No,
event. But okay, so tell me more. I'm really intrigued now because I
it
love
was
like
like
I
a
love the
much
Craig.
different thing and less commercial. So it was very much about like the traditional ofrendas and like all of those things.
Okay.
Then after they would do something small, but then they really blew it up for that movie, and so then it got
Okay.
so much attention that after that they just started making this huge deal out of it.
Oh, that's so intriguing. Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, Daniel Craig. I love his Bond movies were really good, and
Okay.
I remember that, and I actually remember like I really liked that scene. That whole like front, beginning of the scene was amazing. I thought that just was like, oh, that's normal, and they're just like filming. So
Yeah,
that's so funny.
I mean, it got enough attention too. And I was actually just downtown the other day, and they were like building the stuff for
That's
um,
cool.
set up for it, and so that's going to be on Sunday. I'm really excited.
Makes me want to watch that movie now.
Yeah, it's
So,
really good.
so Laura, your path, like it does not read like a straight line. I feel like you kind of have a lot of lives in like one career so far, right? You've got homeland security, finance, culture, leadership, hydroponic farming. It's like every chapter has taught you something different about kind of how people and systems grow. I'm
Yeah.
curious, kind of like delve a little bit deeper into that, and kind of if you could tell me maybe how that unfolded for you.
Yeah, so I don't have a formal education. I didn't have that opportunity early on. And so I just kind of worked odd jobs until I got an opportunity with Homeland Security. And I went on and was just doing like intelligence and linguistics. It was really cool to be part of those investigations and see at a high level how these criminal organizations work. Um, that was really all my exposure that I had to big organizations because prior to that, I was working at like a call center or like, I was a lifeguard for my first job. And so
Yeah,
I hadn't seen like the work of really organized crime and like that type of those areas and those worlds. So I worked for them for I think about 6 years, which was great. And the last case that I was a part of dealt in finance. So I just got
okay.
really interested in how that whole world works, right? Like that's a whole
Yeah,
other type of organization. And so I dipped my toes in. I loved it. And the more that I explored different organizations, the more you see that people are just people. Like whether you're doing
sure.
something dangerous or good or bad or wherever you are,
Illegal.
yeah, like it all ends up being the same structure. Like people are
Yeah,
people, organizations are organizations, the hierarchies are the same. And you really see like what those drivers are. And I think that's the core of everything, right? What motivates us? And like, why are we doing what we're doing? What is that? That book Start With Why, that says it best. Like, you have to know what the root of what you're doing
yeah,
is.
yeah,
So, yeah, I think I drew a lot from those experiences. I moved to New York. I was working for my now mentor, who was my first boss in New York. And he really taught me the core of how he runs his businesses. And it is very people structured, right? Like you can't accomplish anything without
yeah.
your people. And so you can have the best systems, you can have everything top notch, but if you don't have the people who want to do it, you don't really have any.
Yeah. Yeah, and I always think it's interesting because like when you talk about like the criminal organizations versus normal organizations, not criminal, which I guess you could you can make the case whether that's true or not sometimes, right? Um, but the reality of that, there when you talk about motivation, it's different because when you're working for a criminal organization, there's a little bit more critical motivation that's applied. It's life and death in
Yeah,
most cases. If
sure.
you don't do this, like your boss is going to kill you, not fire you. Um, in organizations, though, there is a lot of people that create this identity for themselves that it might as well be death in certain cases, and you're seeing a lot of people. And maybe I'm going to kind of the edge case here of like this, like really. Maybe a little more extreme, if you will. But I think that the analogy still applies, where you do see people where they have such an identity within their job and their role that
Yeah,
when they're alleviated of that role, it does create some kind of organizational or occupational death in a way.
yeah.
Um, how do people get motivated in your mind and from your experience? What causes someone to be motivated, like, and maybe it's someone that you can maybe tie or connect the dots between like organizational crime and organizations. Is there something that ties together? Is there some kind of like string that says like these are two one and the same, or is it very different, life death versus, just money and materialistic type of things that I need to survive, and how we're kind of organizationally structured as a culture or as a government entity. I don't know where I want to go with this, but I would love to get your insights around kind of that tying of connecting the dots there.
I think it's actually so simple. It comes
Okay.
down to fear based versus loyalty based, right? And so if you think about Maslow's pyramid, like your
Hmm.
basic needs to be met no matter what, like you
Sure.
you have to have those things. And so when you're, in a fear-based organization, whether that's, organized crime or working for wherever office you are, if you are being driven by fear, like if you don't do this, you're going to get fired, and like, or we're not going to we're going to dock your pay, or we're going to do these things that are all just very negative and fear based, you're in survival mode. You're not trying to think about how to innovate, how to do better, how to improve a system. You're just trying to survive because you're so afraid that, in the corporate world, like losing your job in a lot of ways is certain death, right? Like in the job market, it's so unpredictable. That's the bottom of the pyramid that you are messing with. Like, I can't
Yeah.
think like, will I be able to feed my kids tomorrow? Like, I need to
Yeah.
be sure that I have a roof over my head and I'm able to go grocery shopping. And when you have these loyalty based organizations, it's very different because you're allowed to mess up. You're allowed to be a person and be human and say, hey, like, this is somewhere I forgot this, I messed this up, I dropped the ball on this. And there's no repercussions that are so terrible that you need to be afraid of, fessing up to it or owning up to it to find a solution. And so ultimately we want the solution. That's the goal, is to have a well-running organization that's solution based.
Yeah.
But when you're too afraid to, and when it's a scary feeling to think I might get fired, I might get in trouble, you're not going to be as good at your job.
That's so good. And I completely agree with that. I think it's interesting that we get into this performance based metrics. We're measuring all of the KPIs that tell us what numbers should look like, as opposed to what people should look like and what they look like under different circumstances. And we're emotional beings, but we don't really track emotion. We track numbers, and those tell different stories. Going from your experience at Homeland Security then into finance, you kind of went from and correct me if I'm wrong, but more people, to then numbers, and then now you're kind of back to people again. Um, when you start
Yeah.
looking at these kind of moments that created kind of areas of interest for yourself, that said, like, I really wanted to be more interested in how people act versus what the numbers show. Um, what was that like for you? What was the kind of maybe aha moment that you had that said, this there's more to it than just numbers?
I don't want to name names, but I worked with an organization who had a 40% attrition rate. And it was a really shocking stat because
Yeah.
you really can't move forward when you're constantly having a revolving door. And so it was a very small organization that just couldn't grow, and everything was right. They were equity backed. They poured so much money. They had top of the line computer systems. Everything that they could want was available, but they just could not keep people in seats. And so you had situations where you had people who had been there for 6 weeks and they were the highest ranking person in
Wow.
their business unit or in their department, because everybody else was just quitting. And so they were hiring as fast as they could, but they were just backfilling positions. And sometimes they couldn't even do that quickly enough. So it was a huge challenge. And then COVID happened, where there was a lot of uncertainty. So people were staying put a little bit longer.
Sure.
And so
Naturally.
naturally, we're not sure what's going to happen. I'm going to hang on to this job. We're all at home, and it became kind of we don't know where this is going to go, but I know that we are not equipped to hire remotely. At that point, that company had never been remote. So not even like, we had to get everybody laptops on the fly. Like everything was just so rushed. And it was just a big wake up call that how will we hire now that we're all here? we have no system set up to do this. And knowing that attrition happens so quickly, we need to set something up. But before that could happen, it was just retention was the name of the game. And so it was all about making people feel safe, like reaching out to people. I was sending out like postcards, like just making sure people felt connected in a world where
Yeah.
we couldn't be connected, right? And that made such a huge difference. You could see people like helping each other more, and it then allowed for us to start building those systems for retention of, like, let's create a training system. So when we are able to hire, people are doing this. We did virtual events. That was like, here we are, everybody received a little party box and we're going to do this
Yeah.
thing together. Even though we're apart, we both have the same puzzle we're going to work on. And so it was just a huge push into we need to have some semblance of connection and unity and community, right? Like when you're in person, it's a semblance of community, but it's really not if you're not pushing for that specifically. And it was just very, very eye opening. That's when the company started to grow, and it, you know, made a massive impact that even our clients were able to see.
Yeah.
And they wanted to start implementing some of those things. And I think that's the core of it. Once you realize you have to take care of your people, these are relationships just like any other, right? Like you have to be good to your friends, to your partner, to your kids. Like you can't just decide that it's going to work because you've hired a person and you're giving them money. That is not a differentiator. All jobs pay money. So you have
Yeah.
to be provide something else.
Yeah, and I think it's one thing that you hit on, especially I think that realizing you need a system to help people. That yes, people want to help people, but that doesn't scale. You've got to
Yep.
have systems in place to help that. Something also that you said on one of our other calls previously, and it kind of always stuck with me. You said that every new hire wants to do a good job. They just
Yeah,
need to be shown how.
absolutely.
Where did that realization come from?
I think it came when I started working for my mentor and my first boss here, and I was so eager and I was so inexperienced, and I think I always had a little bit of an insecurity for not having had a formal education, right? Like, what am I bringing to the table? And I just wanted to do my best. But I think until I met Eddie, he really invested in me, and not just in like, here's, XYZ, this is what you do. He was like, what are your goals? Like, what do you actually want to do in life? And like he would side train me on like managerial accounting, and like here's how to like get EBITDA, and here's how to factor this. And it was skills that I wasn't using in that setting, but it
Yeah,
was just so amazing to be taught these things because I did want to learn and I did want to do a really good job. And it was so great to feel supported and to see somebody want to help me reach that potential, because that was the goal, right? Like
yeah.
nobody starts a job thinking I just want to tank this and like I want people to tell me how terrible I am constantly. No, like
I hope not.
hey, like you're so excited to do your
Yeah,
best. And like, like when you take up a new sport, nobody goes into it. Like nobody starts golfing thinking like I'm gonna just do the worst out of anybody. I'm going to invest all this time and money into
yeah,
supplies to do terribly. No, like you want to have fun, but you also want to
yeah.
do well.
Yeah, yeah. The goal is to improve, whether you actually maybe think about it or not. But like, yeah, I think that when you go into something and it's fresh, a new jobs, whether they're, I mean, sometimes they are scary. Like if it's something that you haven't done before, I talk to so many people that end up going and just completely pivoting, mid-career because they've had to, because of either their role has been outsourced to technology or otherwise, and they're finding themselves like, well, I actually really didn't kind of like what I did. I was good at what I did, but I didn't really like it. Let me go do something I actually like again. And so that's really interesting. It also seems like that kind of is what maybe sparked this idea, or grew this, I guess I should say, the seed that grew into Spark, which is the company that you run now. Tell me a little bit about your company and like what it looks like to work with you as a company. What are the kind of types of problems you solve? What are the types of areas that you feel that um, is uniquely kind of yours to put your mark on the world and around that organization?
So I think what we're most proud of is our process documentation and training creation, which sounds so boring and operationally sound, yes, but it's just a very long, drawn out, like, do we actually need this? But at the end of the day, what that means is, are you able to track what your processes are well enough to teach them to your new hires?
Hmm.
And I think what we're most proud of is you can come from any background and you can have any history. But if you want it bad enough, if you want to be successful and you want to learn how to do a job, we are so excited to provide the tools for you to do that. And
Yeah.
I think ultimately that creates the biggest impact because you're not restricted to people who look and sound in a certain way or have a certain background. You can really say this person has potential because they're bright and they're hungry and they want to do this, not, well, this person can do this because they were raised in this area or they did this in school. So to me, that is the basis of a good culture is training those people. Again, people want to do their best. So
Yeah.
being able to provide those tools for them to do their best is, I think, the biggest part of their start. And not just a start, also just for promotions, right? For unexpected leave, for being able to get more confidence in a person for a future promotion. It is so important to have those trainings. And I think the three core things that we do for Spark are onboarding. We do like the social and cultural elements of a new hire that's not in any way job related. And I think that also helps reduce that attrition, right? I think 30% of attrition happens in the first 90 days. So being
Hmm.
able to serve that in any way, right?
Yeah.
You're still getting to
Yeah.
know this person is huge because you want to be sure that you give them that opportunity to ramp up. So we really focus on those social elements and then we move on into the training. But also, one of our favorite parts is just the cultural elements as well. We do events, we do retreats where people get to just be people. Like I'm knowing you as more than just Chris and more than
Yeah.
just this is his email and this is his department. I know you as a person. And I think
Yeah.
that's really important.
Yeah. How much of that do you think is not being done across the board though? And I guess maybe how I should say that is, so I read this thing recently. It was about how in a lot of Asian cultures, for a lot of the early on education when they're like in like elementary, even like preschool, they don't even really, they have no tests, there's no really assessments, it's just like play. It's a lot of play. And then at a certain level it changes dramatically where it's a lot of learn, but like in the early years there is a lot of play. And we homeschool, so like there's a lot of times we're like, look, we're gonna go to the park first and then we're gonna do our school because like, we need to get some stuff out. But in that playful aspect of things, like my I have a 4-year old, and pretend play, I don't know why, but as an adult pretend play seems so difficult. It's not even exhausting, it's almost irritating.
I
And I
totally
say this like in the most loving way possible, but this idea that as adults, like we almost forgot how to pretend play. We've almost forgot this idea of like the social connections that are so important to a thriving business, but even just thriving relationships in general. For some reason, I keep on seeing this disconnect though between organizations that they just haven't, not, it hasn't clicked yet. Like
yeah.
something in most organizations have not clicked to say, like, is it our fault? Is it us as business owners and consultants and advisors and people that are able to help them execute on this? Is it our fault that they're not able to be educated enough to like get behind this? Or is there something different? I'm always trying to figure that out because the data proves that it works. The data proves that when you look at culture and relationships and looking at that Maslow hierarchy of needs. When you look at those things and you drive your goals and your purpose and your operational elements around those types of metrics, it works. But so many companies don't follow that. I'm just curious if you have some thoughts on maybe why they don't follow it, or what's the disconnect in your mind and where you're seeing that in the markets right now.
I think it all comes from the top, right? And when you really think about, for example, when systems are being chosen for company wide? Who is choosing these systems? Like for finance, they need a new accounting platform. Who ultimately chooses it? Is it the person who's like middle management doing the work? No, it's
Yeah,
like the
that's the
CFO
CFO. Yep.
reports, right? Or it's really coming from such a high level when you're just not down boots on the ground doing the stuff. And so it becomes a little backwards in what the actual needs are. You're looking at the wrong incentives and like KPIs when you're choosing that program. And I think a lot of times we put in such an emphasis on, you know, the hiring process and are they a culture fit, but how, you know, how are you a culture fit for them? And once people come on, it kind of just drops off and there's just no real effort to continue to court them. And I think that takes a big impact. But also, there's my favorite stat is in the Gallup 12 and
Okay.
question 10, do you have a best friend at work? That is the number one indicator of retention. And when you think about that, that's like, that's so silly. I don't want friends at work. I have friends at home. Right. But, you know, the value of having somebody that you can go to and talk to and vent to and celebrate the wins and that knows everything that you're going through, it is invaluable. And I think
Yeah.
everybody can attest to this. Some of the closest people you meet are your work besties, right? And you spend so much time with them. You're doing some hard stuff with
Yeah.
them. And we don't really value that. I think when you look at, you know, again, these KPIs and like what the top level is worried about, it is not friendships. You know, it's not are people liking each other. It's do people like the organization? Do people like what they're doing? And even that sometimes falls by the wayside. But it is crucial to have some type of culture where there are some links made, right? Like you want to know that when you have some type of event, people are excited to see each other and hang out with each other. Because otherwise, what are we doing, right? Everything is so transferable. I can, if you know, if I'm an accountant, I can be an accountant anywhere. If I'm a lawyer, I can be a lawyer anywhere. And when you're not focusing on these social elements of the business, which is we are not robots. We have to have those social elements as well. That's also in the pyramid. Like we need to
Yeah.
fulfill those. And it's just, it doesn't give you any results. And it's like the police officer who has the most tickets, right? They're the most celebrated. But the police officer who stops before the stop sign so that you don't get in an accident because you see him, he's saving the most lives. So which one should be celebrated more? The person who on paper has so many more accolades because they did all of these tickets and got all this money, or the person who actually saved more lives? And I think that's so relevant to what we're doing at work, right? Like, yes, we have XYZ and profit and the margins and this and that, but having situations where you can foster relationships and friendships, those are free. Like you can
Yeah.
just hope that people make these connections, but if you're not actually pushing for it, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And yeah, it's always interesting to me because like a lot of times the the metrics that get looked at are the metrics that are working. The metrics that aren't working, I feel like sometimes get undervalued. And so it's like where's the proof? Well, the proof is in the invisible information that we're not looking at. It's the stuff that we're not seeing. And so instead of putting more exhaustive resources into things that maybe are those like those tickets, maybe putting more resources and training into those other types of events, if you will. I think events is probably the proper word there because I feel like when you think about the things that we remember, it is the moments, it is those it's those events of life that really kind of make us think, oh wow, that was really cool. And there's because it's an emotional response to it. You don't get
For
emotional response unless maybe it's money when you're looking at numbers. You know, and so I think that there's a disconnect there that still needs to be, and I think hopefully we can keep our doing our job to put some education around this space because I think it's so important for organizations and the organizations that are doing it because I want to make sure that I'm being fair to the organizations that are doing this and doing it right, and they're seeing amazing results. So one of the things I really want to make sure we talk about because I think this is again it's such a really interesting is the hydroponic farming projects that you're working on, because one of the things that I think is really a cool analogy is just that the idea that you're working with growth training experience, but you also have a project that is just beaming at growth as a core as a core service. And so, first of all, I guess maybe let's do this. I would love to start out with if you can explain to our audience, one, for those who may not know what hydroponic farming is, and then go into a little bit maybe like how you kind of got started with it and what you're doing with this company, if you're able to talk about it.
Yeah. So the ironic part of all this is I have never been able to keep a plant alive, which is it's just not in my skill set. But hydroponic farming is basically farming that only uses water, and you're growing vertically. It's not on land, and so the growth potential to it is massive. There's so much more control that goes into the vitamins and everything that like this water is getting and how they're growing. It is literally science. It's fascinating. And I think there's a big issue, right? Like population wise and food wise, and our soil is just over farmed to where we aren't getting these nutrients, and also we're running out of space. Like there's multiple issues that I think have been the catalyst in the growth of hydroponic farming. So I started working with this company at the beginning of the summer, and one issue that when we were chatting in the discovery stage, it was like we have a retention problem. And not just that, but when we lose a person, we lose plants because
Mm.
they're the only ones who know how to manage these plants. And all plants are not the same, right? Like I've learned this, like you can overwater some, you can underwater some, over
Yeah.
sun, under sun, like you have to talk to them. There's so much that goes into plants. And it
Wait,
is
did
a
you say you
huge
have to talk to them? You have to talk to the plants?
tell them nice things. That experiment where it's like
So
if you
plant
have two.
belief systems. Yes.
Yeah, and you're like saying like, "Oh, you're beautiful, you can grow, you're amazing, you're a beautiful plant that I believe in." And then you have another plant that you're like, "You're a terrible, ugly plant, you're never going to grow." This is actually like an experiment you can do at home with like random grocery store plants, but one
Okay.
will grow and one won't. And it's like it's a whole larger conversation on the power of
Wow.
our words and
Yeah.
intention, but it is very real and fascinating
That's
to me.
amazing.
So yeah, like there's all this process, and every plant is very distinct and different. And so their big pain point was not just that they're losing people, it's that it's now affecting their profits in other ways, right? They're losing these plants and the process to actually grow them all and like start over. And you can have basically like a cancer within the plant that like then starts growing, and it's just you have to be very particular. So we identified two problems, right? They had a culture problem with that attrition, and it had become a revolving door. But also they had a huge need for documenting all of the training for how to grow these plants, because attrition will happen. You can have the best organization and people will just
Sure.
eventually move on in some cases, particularly in like certain levels in certain industries. But it is just the fact of life. You should keep them happy as long as you can, but you should also believe in their growth if that's not an opportunity within your company.
Yeah.
So what we started doing is just doing that heavy documentation. It's been really neat. We wear like meta glasses and like see the leaves
Awesome.
and the quality and like put the traits, like this is what it should look like. And this is, how many hours of sun exposure and what type and at what level and the type of water and like what nutrient, like everything is so, again, scientific that it's been so fun to one, learn how to keep plants alive. I
Yeah.
still have not successfully done it at home, but it's just this whole ecosystem of you have to have the right person taking care of it. And they, when they love what they do, which usually they do, they're just so excited to see this growth. And it's such a beautiful thing because it's like instant gratification. You're seeing a
Sure.
physical manifestation of your growth within that plant.
Yeah, all the effort that you're putting through it. I mean, you could even say love, right? I mean, all the things that you're, giving the plant. I wonder. So, I've got two sides of my brain kind of like firing off at once here, though, because I'm part of me. I totally get it. The nurturing element of plant, how it relates to the nurturing side of an organization on their people. So we would say, plants equal people in this analogy. At some point, though, like some people are better at it than others. right? Some people are better at nurturing than others. Some
For
people are
sure.
better at communicating than others. It, as you start to get more data, and through emotional intelligence, through awareness, through cognitive awareness, through physical awareness, all these different things that we can kind of these different parameters of data that we can tap into. Being aware of them is one thing, and then taking that data and then training against it so that we can have really really good outputs. So inputs and outputs are equal. You're doing well. You're in a system. At what point, because I thought what you said about that, when you lose a person, you lose a plant. And that is, how many times in an organization is that true? But then organizations adapt and they realize, oh, well, that person really did mean a lot for organization. They left maybe on their own accord, or let go, or just a growth opportunity came up, etc. But either way, they left, and it left a gap within the organization. A lot of times organizations, they don't really sometimes they don't realize what they have when they lose it. um,
Absolutely.
right? And sometimes they actually never valued it in the first place, and so they don't replace it very quickly because of that. But in a system, you have, and that's where my two brains are kind of firing here, because I feel like you've got one instance where this matters a lot and we need to replace it. We need to build systems so we don't lose this. There's an opportunity here to grow, to scale, to really take all the data we've learned. But we need people to help us get there. So on one side, you have, well, if I'm helping an organization document all of their systems, does that eventually replace me and they don't need me because they have systems? On the other side of it, if the organization has all these systems in place, do they get disconnected from the individual nature that is that relationship between that plant and that person, or a person and a person, a person and a manager? Like, I'm just curious, like, where your thoughts go, and like, how do you kind of maybe navigate these areas of resistance potentially that happen within training environments, where you have people that say we need training because we need systems, because we need to scale, and we need to teach people that may not know how to do these things to do them well or do them better. But on the
Right.
other side, you got people that do them really well, and you're making sure that the relationship is still intact, that the individual um the individual contribution that someone is giving to, whether it's a task, a plant, a person, whatever it may be, that it's not being lost. Because how do you document relationships in a training? And I think that maybe is the question I'm trying to ask is, are you able to capture emotion in your training? Are you only capturing the task at hand? And what is maybe the pro and con that exists between those two? And I'm kind of challenging you here, but this is something we haven't planned about. But I you started getting me thinking, and I was like, I really am interested in this idea of like, how do you capture emotion in training? Because I think that's something that organizations have a hard time scaling, right? Is how do
Yeah.
you actually keep the culture in a place that people can relate to, and that you build a good nutrition rate within an organization, and you're not getting um, you're not having this retention issue. How do you do that? Well, you said it earlier. You build relationships. You tie into the best friend factor. How do you scale that though?
I think so. It's a very multiple part situation because when you
Yeah.
look at what the training is providing, it's providing empowerment. And that is something that's not really tangible, right? But that's what it is. You're giving an employee or a person something to own, and they own this process. This is theirs. And it's not just about documentation, it's about, how can we improve it? So every single time have like a, well, this is how we were supposed to do it, but I found this, but like, this is the way. And it's an interesting thing because we will document that too. And ultimately when we speak to, the powers that be, we're like, have
Sure.
you considered this? Or, here's how these systems overlap, but they could be doing this. And it's really great to see that empowerment, but also you see that excitement over, you can literally learn anything here. If you want to be this position,
Yeah.
we're going to be documenting this, and like you can be doing that. So it really gets people excited about, initially not because the process is boring, but they do
Yeah.
get more into what that could be. But as far as, like the emotional, the documentation of the, culture and those things like that, the thing is like, if we have to systematize it, it would look like having, quarterly virtual events if you're a hybrid team, or, planning for certain touch points with certain groups, right? Creating those groups, whether it's, the leadership group, sales, with people who are interested in, sports and this and that, like creating these micro groups that you have something in common. You're not alone. You're not here operating in a vacuum. It looks more like caring about, like when you're a host. I think when you own a company, you're basically hosting all of your employees. And I know when I host anything, I want to make sure, like, okay, you're vegan, you don't drink alcohol, we're gonna
Yeah.
have some mocktails, we're gonna have some, meat alternatives. Like, I want to make sure everybody's taken care of. And it really, again, just comes from the top. It can't really be a documented thing, and it can't really be put on the employee level because it's not on them. You're hosting them. You want them to be happy. So it has to look a little bit more like, you know, that intentional push for culture improvement. That's
Yeah.
not going to give you KPIs, right? You're not going to make money
Yeah.
off of it. You're not going to lose money, but like you're not seeing a direct line into how this is becoming dollars.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. That makes sense. What like when you talk about like the training aspects and going through people, are they usually coming to you and saying, look, we realize that this is an issue and we need this service, or are they coming to you with something different and it ends up there?
You know, it's it really messes with me because I'm an operator. I am not a
Yeah.
natural salesperson. So when I first started the company, I was like, oh, sales is easy. I could totally, like, people need these services. And it's so funny because the people who need it most are not aware that there's a problem. And the
Yeah.
people who don't need it are aware of the problem, but they've already started solving it.
Sure.
So for me, where that point of inflection usually comes is typically in equity backed companies who
Okay.
need to scale very quickly. And, we are in a very different world. Yes, like people are in office, but for the most part, people are hybrid. So we need to figure out a
Yeah.
situation where, you're not taking the time from a trainer to be able to train each individual person at the pace of growth that needs to happen.
Yeah.
So often it just becomes that, right? Like it's a need of we need to scale quickly and we don't have the system set up for it. But, in reality, it is something that all companies should have, not
Yeah.
just for scalability, but also if you're ever going to sell your company, for example, having
Mhm.
all of the process documented immediately raises your valuation because you're now a plug and play company. We have all the secret sauce. We know what you can do.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a very interesting inflection point where I come
Yeah.
in. I don't know when those situations are, right? So I just have to rely on, word of mouth and referrals, which I'm, always the most flattering. But
Yeah.
it is just one of those things that you don't realize you have a problem until you have a great need for it.
Yeah, and so many leaders within organizations at that level, they just sometimes they don't have the time to realize there's a problem. Like they know something's up, but they're like, I don't have time to mess with it. Like I know that if I actually do take the time, there's going to be more on my plate that I have to worry about now, and I'd rather just almost let it just kind of be his problem without me giving observing it. And and so yeah, I think it's really interesting that when you start talking about how when you talk about every company needs this, it's so true because like whether there's growth and then there's scale, right? Very different, very different from each other. And sometimes I hear where companies like, well, I don't, especially on the smaller business side, it's interesting how like, well, I don't really want to scale. Like I'm okay. Okay, great. But do you want to go have a vacation? Do you want to like make sure you're not the one dependent on this? Are you able to like go and give yourself a break? Whereas the larger companies, they have very similar issues, but they have sometimes some more they have more resources and people, and so now it becomes dramatically a systems issue. But yeah, no, I think it's really interesting. I love that the training side of things that you're doing, the things that systemizing the business, making sure that's repeatable is amazing. um, I've got, maybe one more question to ask you before we end today, and that is, um, what have you kind of learned or have been taught through this experience of working with others organizations? You're putting training programs in place for them. You're in helping them optimize and standardize and systemize their business. What has been the number one thing that you've kind of been maybe trained or learned throughout that experience that maybe caught you off guard?
Definitely how different people think. Because, when
Yeah.
you think about you getting like IKEA instructions to build something, like I love it. I thrive off of these like just little figures, no words, like maybe there's going to be a number telling you which screw to use. I love it. And then
Yeah.
there's people who can't read that at all. And, there's people who only learn via video, and there's people who only learn when I explain it to you thoroughly. And some people only via text. Like there's so many different ways to learn. And even within those, there's like micro differences within how people do and receive and retain information. And I think when you're only thinking about like, oh, I'm going to explain it this way, well, it's not always going to work, right? Like
Mhm.
you're explaining it in a way that makes sense to you. And some people see the forest, some people see the trees, some people
Yeah,
see the
it's true.
leaves, right? So like you're
Yep.
just really going through what works for everybody. But I think the best part was when I first started, and I was just, sitting with them. Basically, what we do is we get trained on your systems
Yep.
and we create the trainings based off of the training you've given us. And then we review it, we make it, we go through different pass points and whatever. But it was really interesting going through, the first iterations of it where I was like sitting and learning. And these people are like, yeah, you go in here and you pull the invoice and then you fill it in. And that's the process. And I'm like, where's the invoice coming from? Like, where are you? It's just here. You just grab it from here.
It's
And
just here.
like, it exposes so many holes in training because all people are different people, right?
Yeah.
So, like, it's so dependent on who is training you,
Yes.
on what you're actually receiving. And something that will be really obvious to someone who's done it forever is going to be very different. But also, even if you're being very thorough, some people, will just send me like a document and be like, this is what I'm doing. I'm like, okay, like, let's do a screen share. And they're like, I don't know how to explain it like that. And you
Yeah.
just really learn. You also get so much empathy for the fact that everybody is so different, right? So like
Yeah.
me doing and explaining things, and I used to get really frustrated thinking, like, why don't they understand this? Or this is very easy. And then you realize, wait, why didn't I understand it when somebody said it this way? Like now I'm
Yeah.
the one that's sucking that. But it really is just appealing to everybody and how we can make it as thorough and accessible to all learning paths and views. And it was humbling for sure when I just thought like, yeah, I can learn anything, but it really depends on who is teaching it and how.
That's oh man, that's such insightful. Like it's so insightful for to kind of understand that it's not about your perception. Sometimes it is about the articulation of communication from the get go from the start. And so that's amazing. Um, what is one takeaway that if you could sum it up in maybe one sentence that you would give others to kind of uh, give some awareness and some education around what you do and why it's so important.
I think if I'm like to sum up, spark or
Sure.
just what's most
Yeah,
important.
Spark, because that's what I mean. It's inherently what you do. I mean, the training, the standardization, systemizations. Why is that so important for an organization to do? Um, and I just leave it at that. Like, what would be the takeaway that you would want to give organizations for that?
I think this is a quote that I don't remember where I read it, but it
Sure.
sticks with me every day. Starting is easy, scaling is hard. And when you really start to think about what it is to run a business, it is so different from what it is to grow a business. And you can have a business and it can operate exactly as it does in a vacuum, right? Like if
Yeah.
you're existing as a vacuum, continuing to do exactly what you're doing is, yeah, like that will work. But in a real life setting, it doesn't. Systems are evolving, people are evolving, the world, the landscape, everything is changing day by day. And when you are not prepared to change with it, it's going to really limit you. And when thinking about that growth and that scaling and what you want for the future, I read this great book about just when you start a business, you should start it with the idea that infinity exists, right? And you are going to have this company for infinity, not for 10 or 15 years. Like you're going to have it forever. And what would you do now to make that happen?
Hmm.
And so much of that affected how I started Spark. Like I've documented everything from the start. Even though it changes, it's something that I'm able to see this is why this changed and this is how it was changed.
You know what changed?
And I know what changed exactly.
Yeah.
And like what those factors were, that's crucial. But
Yeah.
when you're looking to scale, being able to have that accountability of we have these systems, we have these people and these processes. And yeah, like not just for that training factor, which is massive. If you are planning on promoting people and hiring people, you need to have these systems in place, but also just for your own accountability of knowing this
Yeah.
is how we've done business and how we continue to do it and how it grows and it changes and why.
Yeah, that's so important. It's so important. And there's a quote that you made me think about. It says that change is inevitable, growth is optional, and
Yeah.
it kind of sums it up, I think, in a way. So I think that's a great. Laura, you have been amazing on this session today. I learned a lot from you today, and I appreciate you coming on. It's been wonderful having you.
Thank you so much, Chris. This was great.
Absolutely. All right, take care. Talk to you soon.
Bye.